welcome everybody. My name is Jeff Jackson, as Dan was just introducing me. I'm here in Algonquin College, which is in Eastern Ontario in Canada, where we're in, we have a real winter day here. We've got a typical kind of frozen, lots of snow on the ground. I'm happy to spend the next hour talking to you about some of the things that I've really collected amongst the research I've been doing. So my field of study, I'm pretty immersed in this idea about training and around high performance training, specifically for safety critical industries. That's what my PhD studies are in, where I actually did research with firefighters and power operators and whitewater raft guides. And doing that work really opened up a whole other, looked at so many different other industries to see what they're talking about, what they're thinking about. And this is really just trying to capture some of those little pieces that some of those threads that we can really build upon. So I've delivered the same talk in a couple different environments, a couple different venues, the Wilderness Risk Managers Conference at AOR, a couple other places along the way, and as well as lots of companies, lots of operations are pretty intrigued by some of these ideas, and I've been helping them try to implement some of these ideas about how to put training around safety critical incidents into their curriculum, into their training programs to make this work. So that's where I'm coming from on this. So I have a series of PowerPoint slides. We'll kind of click our way through, and it's a story. It really, I kind of position this as a long narrative to kind of get to a point of a so what. So let me kind of outline the agenda a little bit. So we're going to talk first about schemas and sense-making, and then that kind of opens the door or anchor this whole thing with a motivated behavior model. And it's kind of a really way to see how all this fits together. And then I'm going to talk about how you train this, how you make this into a training paradigm, and where this might fit into the things that you're doing. So it comes from this whole thing comes from the assumption that the first bullet point, spending training time in normal doesn't prepare you for non-normal. And typical training is about how to do it right. And there's a faulty logic to say that by knowing and getting good at how to do it right somehow prepares you for when things go wrong. So I'm talking about the other end of this. I'm talking about the wrong part of it. What does non-normal look like? So how can we create training that focuses on non-normal, anticipates what that is, and builds that in? So how do we do that? We do that with meaningful interaction with inherent risks. Those are going to be slightly different given each program, given each venue, given your geography and the context. But that's going to be our takeaway homework, is to identify what kind of inherent risks are in your programs, and how can you create meaningful interaction so that our staff develop coping skills at the boundary. That's not my word. That's from probably one of the most famous risk management authors, named Jens Rasmussen from Denmark. He's best known for his systems approach to risk management, and that's being incorporated. We've been talking about that in our sector for the last 5 or 10 years. But this particular thread, and one that is not really being talked about by other folks, is idea about coping skills at the boundaries. And it really rang a bell with me, and you'll see where it ties into what we do. Ultimately, we're trying to create a culture here where we build skills, we build our staff skills, our frontline skills, build a culture of safe failure so that they understand what failure means, and that is not catastrophic when it happens, instead of a fail-safe mode, which many places are training around fail-safe. Do it right, don't make mistakes, and we'll be okay. And there's faults there because the mistakes will happen, so how can we be prepared for this? This is one piece of many systems that run an operation. So if you have a program activity in the middle, we've got all these systems around the outside. This is really a part of the staffing story. But I am very careful. I believe wholeheartedly in the systems approach, and that is no one thing's in isolation. This is one piece of many things that need to operate together to make systems work. So that's going to leave that where it is, but I want to make it clear that this is not an end in and of itself. It's one piece. Targeted towards staff, we're really talking about staff here. You may be training students who will someday in the staff role, so there might be some application. I don't propose that this is what we should be doing with our clients per se. So here's a question. Dan, would you put up a poll for us? Do you train decision-making in your staff training? Is that something that you teach? Is that something that you spend time on? Give me a yes or no. Is that something that you formally dedicate some time to in your staff training? We'll see how our numbers add up here. All right. So we have a mix. It's typically addressed. So there's some assumptions here. So thanks, Dan. There's some assumptions here that whenever you're hiring people and starting from scratch, you need to train all their skills. And I think that other places that maybe are bringing in experienced instructors, they don't necessarily focus on teaching decision making. The second question, or the logical fallout of this is, okay, so we teach decision making. How do you teach that decision making? Just get my computer screen going again. So the answer to that is typically we use a fairly rational model of decision making, and I know that that's taught academically, and it's in all of the outdoor books. It's about analyzing problems, or it's about heuristics, or whatever that approach might be. Having people identify the pros and cons of options. Those are all very analytic, and that's the top of this pyramid. That's the of this iceberg. That's the conscious mind. That's the choice. And here's what we know about brain science, which is unraveling very rapidly over the last 10 years. We've learned so much about our brains, and what we know is that almost everything that happens unconsciously, subconsciously, based on programming, based on a whole bunch of other things. But conscious thought, the rational human person, is really not as rational as we think they're going to be. So today, when this kind of landed, this realization came to me. It really came to the obvious question of, so how can we train for the subconscious decision making, the subconscious, which involves emotion, which involves values, which involves situational awareness. It involves so many different things. How can we train that? And here's a pitch for a model of how this might all fit together. Like I said, I've shown these slides and this story, told this to a couple of different audiences, and start with a picture like this and say, what's going on here? And as a show of hands, you probably all recognize this. This is a end of course hug group photo. You know, we've all got these, and we can recognize these. All of us right now probably look at this and can guess what's going on here. Some of you who maybe even see more cues in this picture may recognize this actually as an outward bound group, and why you might recognize that as outward bound as this heavy yellow rain gear. So you look at that and say that's an outward bound group. What's going on in this picture? The same, we can, in the same kind of scenario, imagine what's going on here. There's some kind of peak experience going on. These folks are hiking. They're in the wilderness, so we can all relate to these. We can easily slot these images in to categories in our mind, or we can slot. We see these pieces of this puzzle. We pull them off the pictures and say, yeah, I see what's going on here. Look at a photo like this and say, yeah, you know, I'm not a canoeer, but I can kind of guess what's going on here. This group is loading boats or getting organized, or they're doing something along these lines. That's because we have what's called schema. We've got ways through our shared experiences. We've all had our own individual paths, but they've all been parallel. And we develop a way of organizing information. Those are called schemas. My wife's a grade 2 teacher, and this is on her door. So in grade 2, they're talking about schema. So using what I already know to help me understand new information. So at an educational level with kids, it's about helping them understand how every new piece of information is connected to what they already know. Well, we have the same thing. And as adults, we have quite a rich, deep schema. And then as we go towards our area of expertise, if it's in outdoor education or experiential education or adventure tourism, we have some deep knowledge there, which means we have ways of organizing that information because we spend so much time with this information. So schema, technically speaking, a schema is a template for recognizing a particular class of cues. So environmental threats or opportunity, I use the word cues. Cues are just the little things that we sense, that we either see, smell, hear, feel, and we collect those and we say, oh yeah, I've got a way to organize those, and they go into this category, and that's how we interpret them. So it's our basic interpretation skill set, and it's based around this idea of schema. So I like to have this idea about in our mind, in our memory, we have all these boxes, all these drawers of our memories, and they're all sorts of our whole lifetime worth of memories. And whenever we sense cues, we instantaneously, and this is a miraculous part of our brain, instantaneously go shopping through that whole vast memory bank and see, have I seen this before? And where does this fit? That's where we use schema. The whole raft of psychological questions and images such as these, which are really meant to confound your schema. It's meant to challenge your ability to take a cue and figure out where to put it. So all of these, and much of this world of psychology quizzes is about confounding our schemas and making challenges around those things. Dan, do you have another poll to put up? In this photo, what do you see in this photo? What's your kind of first impression when you see in this photo? It's one of two things. So if Dan puts up a poll for you, click on what you see here. This is probably the most famous psychology image there is, and there's potentially two things to see here. So potentially you're seeing an old woman looking into her fur coat, where she has a pointy chin and a big nose with a white scarf around her head and a feather. Or potentially you look at this and you see a young woman looking over her shoulder. So looking back into the distance, you just see the tip of a nose and an eyelash, and you see an ear and a cheekbone. You can see either. Interestingly, whenever we collect these cues, these vague cues in this case, we put them somewhere. I see a young woman or I see an old woman, and then we are attached to that. And that's how we start to, our whole narrative will start to unfold around that. That's actually called sense making. How we take those cues and put them somewhere, that's called sense making. We use our schema, which are categories. We use our collective ability and then go shopping for where to put them. That's called sense making. So another image. What's going on in this picture? This is just an ambiguous photo. Honestly, I just went shopping for a photo that didn't really say anything. And I asked crowds what this looks like. And some people say this is a doctor talking to a patient. Some people say that their friends are joking. Some people say this looks like a priest in church. Very subtle little cues people are interpreting. It's the same photo, but they're taking it and through their sense-making process are categorizing it differently. So schemas are categories attached to memory. Very interesting. I'm going to come back to this part of it. It's our experiences that create the schema, that create the categories, and then we remember them. So that's a part of this story. And then sense making is that ongoing process. So we take photos, for example. I'm going to show you some photos here, and you go through a process of sense making. You look at that photo and you look for cues to try to categorize it. So what is going on here? At first, your eyes are kind of lost. There's nothing to anchor. You go looking around in circles. You probably start in the top left and go right. That's how we're taught to read. And then you go down and you find a little rock climber. I get it. This is a rock face. I understand that. It's not immediately evident. So you had to go through a sense-making process to look at that. So I'm going to show you some more photos. Try to observe how you are making sense of these images. And the making sense part of this is, how are you collecting information and therefore building a story to recognize what it is, building a narrative around it. So if I give you this photo, where does it start? What do you see when you look at this? So you have to collect just the few cues that you get. I'm going to give you some more, though. You've got a few cues. I'll add on a few more cues. So now, does that confirm your original placement, your original schema selection, or does it actually change it? And then I'm going to give you more information. Oh, okay, I see. Oh, I get it. So there's more going on. Yeah, that actually kind of confirms. So maybe this is a person in a conference or at a brainstorming session or doing something. I'm not exactly sure what the details are, but that's not important. What about this? Oh, that's kind of weird. All right, so there's maybe some information that doesn't quite fit. What's a basket of garbage doing on their table? Well, maybe we can make a story out of this. But that's a process of sense making, is how we take a piece of information and we continually shop it around and go looking for a home for it. I'm going to show you another photo. Try to observe how you make sense of this sense making process. So first response is probably like, oh, wow, that's too bad. But this is somewhat of a confounding photo for us. It takes people a second to understand what's going on here. So putting this up in front of a crowd, it's typically a case of image, second of silence, and then a ooh. But it's that second in between there, which is what's so fascinating. That's the sense making. There's a van with boats. Oh, we get that. We have pretty entrenched schema for that one. Fire, that schema we know too. That one's buried deep down in our brain from tens of thousands of years ago. But they don't go together. So when we see a photo of them together, it takes a second to reconcile these and understand what's going on. That's sense making. So that's where schemas fit together, and we're going to come back, and this model is about building schema and building people's ability in sense making because it's so important. And why is it so important? Because of this motivated behavior model that I want to talk about. So the traditional outdoor adventure leadership, risk-based, safety-based training goes around decision making and judgment. And it kind of uses the bottom part of this image. So if we start at the bottom, motivated behavior or action. So if we're looking for a certain set of actions, let's say as a manager, we have expectations of what we would like our staff to do. behaviors that we're looking for, we know that there's a skill set to make those work. So working upstream, we know that we need to develop some skills. Whenever we work upstream further, we talk about decision-making and judgment. So it looks like this, the traditional role, the traditional model. We're going to help people develop their ability to make decisions, to implement the skills that they have, to create the behaviors that we're hoping they're going to do, right? So decisions implement skills, and then skills are the KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, create that motivated behavior. But there's more going on than that. So there's more complexity to this story. And if we go up to the very top through this idea about sense making and schema, that's really where decision making starts. And I don't talk about decision making. For the record, I teach decision making here in our college program where we're doing a diploma level guide training. I teach decision making, but it's taught in this context of this model as a piece of schemas and sense making. So it starts upstream with schemas and sense making, assembling cues, putting them in a category to understand them. Then that leads to a mobilized response. And we ask ourselves, what's going on here? Oh, I understand. Now, is this my authority? Is this my issue to solve? Do I need to act on this? If the answer is yes, then I either go through decision-making and judgment, which doesn't happen that often. Typically, once we realize it's our authority, we jump straight to the activity itself. Okay, I'm going to show you a problem on the next screen just to prove this. You have the Q&A function. Whenever you can solve this problem, just type the answer into the Q&A function. So here's the question for you. Can you find the mistake? When you do, type it in the Q&A function, and we'll see, just say, got it. Don't give the answer away. Just say, when you got it, just type it in there and say, yep, I see it. Got it. Got it. We got lots of people coming on. Very good. So, does anybody not have it yet? Anybody still stuck? You don't need to admit it if you're still stuck on this. See, lots of people got it. So, here's the interesting. I love this little challenge. Here's the how it works for us, how it exemplifies what it is that we're talking about. Very good, thank you. So, can you find the mistake? When you look at this, you see numbers, and you go looking for a number solution, which is incorrect. It's a letter problem. It's a word problem, and it's not a number problem. And this is clearly planted for you as a challenge, because whenever we go to the next step, get my screen going, go to the next step, back to our motivated behavior model, if you looked at that problem from a sense-making activity, you said number problem, and you went looking for a number solution, it's not there. If you found that as an open, and you were open and looked at all the cues, it's a word problem. The numbers are a red herring there. There's two thes. So can you find the mistake? With our human brains being very efficient, we skip over the second the just to get to the point of this, and we go looking for a number solution. That's a sense making. That's a trick in sense making. So if you went looking for a number solution, your decision making model was completely wrong. Your motivated behavior action is on the wrong track, right? Your train left the station in the wrong direction. That's a sense making problem. So this is where regardless of how good your decision making skills are, if you make an error in sense making, nothing else happens, right? So that's why this is important. And this is what's, I think, the relevant part of this big story. So schema and sense making is so important for us because it mobilizes a response, then we can implement skills and we can get rolling. The mobilized response, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today. It quite frankly is its own hour on its own. It goes like this. Imagine you're walking down the sidewalk and you see a cigarette butt on the ground. We all see that. We probably all see, I don't know how many of those a day, dozens, potentially hundreds of those a day. Do you stop and pick them up? Probably you don't. Now, schema and sense making, you know what it is. However, from a mobilized response, you look at that and say, not my problem. I'm going to keep going. We know they're wrong. We know they don't belong. We know we could pick them up, but we look at that and say, not my problem. So decision making doesn't get engaged. There's no skills and abilities, and there's no behavior. So all of these need to happen in action. Yeah, you can make sense of it, but if you don't feel like you have the authority to act on that, then nothing else happens. So as an aside here, and this is as far as this little aside will go, our staff need to continually hear, you're the guide, you're in charge, you need to respond. You're the guide, you're in charge, you need to respond. Regardless of how they make sense of the situation, we want to mobilize a response for them, and we want it to be clear for them. The fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze response. The freeze is based on mobilized response. It's whenever folks don't know they have the ability to respond. It's as in their body's not responding to that. Anyways, leaving that. Another fascinating story for another day. Sense making. So whenever we look at it in this context, human activities then become a consequence of how we make sense of a situation, and it no longer becomes an error in decision making. And that's an important part of this. So it's not like it's not a model of a fallible human being making mistakes, as in, wow, but my guides really blew that and made an error in decision making or an error in judgment. In fact, we look at it with some more complexity and say, how did they make sense of that situation? And given that, how they made sense, they acted appropriately. So no one, given a certain scenario, how they make sense, acts ridiculously on purpose. They do what they think is right. So now the question wasn't about their choices about right. Now it's a question about how did they understand the information. So that places decision making as merely a continuous control task. And there's Rasmussen, my guru in this particular field. Decision making is only about keeping things on track. And I like to liken this to, imagine a beginner, or maybe the first time you jumped in a kayak, especially a whitewater kayak, and you paddle left, you paddle right, and the wiggle waggles left and right and left and right. Even when you learn to ride a bicycle, you wobble left and right, you wobble all over. But as you get better, you start to go in a straight line. And yes, there's still some deviation left and right, but those deviations become smaller and smaller. That decision making in this role, from a safety standpoint, is about keeping that parameters much tighter together. We're going to understand where that fits together here in a second. Sense making. Sense making, relying upon our schema so that we can enact action that'll come out from underneath this. So therefore, this matters for safety critical events. This model probably doesn't necessarily apply for the kind of whole of outdoor leadership. And certainly in my mind, its parameters fit best around safety critical decision, time-based, high intense, the high risk, high critical situations that we see. So I asked you this question earlier. Do you teach decision making? Yes. Well, how do you teach decision making? I think there's another question then, which says, if we know there's something else going on here besides decision making, how can we teach that? So my question to you would, do you teach how to fail? And there's the answer is you probably are, but maybe not purposely. And I'm going to position to you, propose to you that we need to be purposefully teaching people how to fail, because it's going to build their schema, build their sense making, and allow them to understand where the boundaries are around their activities. So here's the model part of this whole thing: training for normal and training for non-normal and training for failure. Training for failure comes from the weightlifting world. I'm no weightlifter. My skinny arms here, you can tell. What they say is you put a weight on a bar and you lift it as many times until you can't lift it anymore. And by doing so, you get stronger. Right? That's physiological adaptation. Well, there's also a psychological adaptation that goes with that. So by understanding where our boundaries are, we will get stronger at those boundaries. And that's what Rasmussen has been talking about for some time. And I think that's a really important perspective to take here. So what we do now is we flip our perspective on safety critical events from one of being the rescuer, to being the rescued. Whenever we turn around in that kind of scenario, it really starts to open up some doors for us. So here's what I'm a river person. That's my own background. So I came out of the canoe guiding, the wilderness northern canoe trip guiding background in the whitewater world. Spent lots of time teaching people how to throw rescue ropes, and spent zero time on how to catch them. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, great. I'll hit you with the bag, but you won't know what to do with it when it comes to you. So when you flip that around and start to train people on how to catch a bag, yeah, you've got to teach them how to throw it to get there. It becomes incidental. But really, who are we worried about? We're worried about the person in the water. So why don't we try to create some skills there, coping skills at the boundaries? That's Rasmussen's words. So when we flip this around, or go from a kind of like a football field, where we kind of see all the players moving around in the football field and have this bird's eye view, and we kind of put ourselves in the scenario to understand the context and the feelings and what would it be like there, it changes the story. And that's how we can change our training, is to try to be in that place. What does a safety critical situation look like? And how can we help people cope when they're there? We do that by meaningful interaction with the inherent risks. So rather than striving to control behavior by fighting deviation, rather than trying to prevent mistakes, training for normal, we control behavior by making the boundaries explicit and known. Boundaries are really important to me, and by giving opportunities to develop coping skills at those boundaries. So we're flipping around from don't make a mistake, that's fail-safe operations, to the exact opposite, which is how can we create environments to have people explore failure so that they get some level of understanding there. So when it happens, sense making is effective and there's a response. If there's no schema, there's no sense making and nothing happens. There's nothing to fall out from underneath that. There's no action, there's no behavior, there's no implementation of skills. So this is Rasmussen's diagram. This is where the kind of academic stuff comes in, and I'm going to skip it for your own benefit. Happily, you'll say, yay. So in this, the center, experiments to improve performance create Brownian movements. That's our staff. Brownian movements is basically trial and error. That would be the equivalent in our field. So people more or less trial and error and kind of bounce around. And there's lots of room for trial and error. And there's continual trial and error in our outdoor sector. And that's okay because we're a fairly loosely coupled activity. It's not so critical that you can't make small mistakes and catch them along the way. It's over on the left side is where this becomes useful for us. So there is on the top left the boundary of functionally acceptable performance, right? The boundary of functionally acceptable performance. Those are hard lines. It's like, we don't kill people. We don't maim people. Here's the things that we don't tolerate, right? Those are the hard lines of our risk tolerance. Okay, well then there's the boundaries that our staff perceives. As you come inside that, there's boundaries that our staff perceive. Well, we want to have, here's what I'm proposing. We want to have our staff be very clear on where these lines are. So yeah, they'll kind of hang around in the middle and bounce around and spend potentially a whole career of 5 or 10 years as an outdoor instructor and never really see the boundaries, never really see the edges. I would say they're lucky, because much of what we do, there's an element of random chance to it. Where bad weather, there's just random chance to bad weather. And I would prefer that my instructors have experience with bad weather on purpose. And the first time they encounter those high critical situations is not when they're tagging students or clients along behind them. So in a training scenario, how can we get people to go near those boundaries to develop coping skills? You might recognize these. Anybody from the statistics world recognize this as a normal distribution curve? I think it works. Forget the numbers. That doesn't mean anything other than to say that the majority of our work days fall into that dark blue middle category. You know, that's the typical deal. Way out on the edges are random events. And, you know, we can't control random events, and that's why they're random. And we can't even train for random events. Who knows what these things are? These are the wings that fall off airplanes and land in the, I don't know, in the middle of your group while you're sitting in an eddy. I don't know what that would be. Random events. Don't worry about those. What we do worry about, what myself as a manager here in a college program, or I've got students in the field all the time with 30 different instructors, I worry about the shoulders. There's all the main activities, that dark blue stuff. That's statistically almost all the days fall in there, but it's the shoulders where things start to get towards the boundaries of weird, the non-normal stuff. So where's non-normal happen? Non-normal happens whenever we get closer to Rasmussen's hard edges. So if I flip back, so as we get over towards the left-hand side here, the boundaries of functionally acceptable performance, that's non-normal. Those are the shoulders. So that's where I believe we need to train. Spending all our training days in the normal day, you know, they're going to get that at work. So we shouldn't try to reinforce that over and over by creating and having one rich schema, one schema that's really deep, because when they're working, they're going to be there anyways. What I want to train them for are the edges and provide lots of breadth of experience, lots of different schema for what it looks like around those edges. So that's the focus. The green area, that's all good. That's work. And that's just normal stuff. And it's relatively low risk. It's just the kind of regular everyday. It's the yellow on the edges that where we spend our training time. The red out on the tails, we can't really deal with that stuff because it's not predictable. It's beyond probably our trainability anyways. So it's those yellow shoulders that I'm thinking about. So how do we train for critical events? Here's what it looks like. Traditionally, we train technical skills. How do we do that? By delivering a metered progression. So letting people build skills piece by piece. That's not going to change. How do we build peer leadership? We give them some coached whether it's apprenticeship or some coach leadership, that's probably not going to change either. Number 3 and 4, how do they understand a normal day, a normal activity, a normal situation, a normal course, a normal program? We do that by showing them normal. How do we help them respond to non-normal? We give them analytic decision-making tools. So there's some limitations here. Analytic decision-making tools don't work to respond to non-normal. So here's what I would argue. To help people understand normal, we show them non-normal. We show them not. And by understanding not, they'll understand what is normal. And then likewise, rather than focusing on decision-making, we focus on sense-making. Like I said, I come out of the paddling world. I'm an avid sea kayaker. I look at these photos. This photo drives me crazy. Why does this drive me crazy? Well, you're never going to fall out of your boat on a nice flat pond like that. And if it's a situation that's going to dump you out of your boat, it's not going to be a situation where you're going to take the time to find your paddle float and blow into it, inhale it, expand that thing, put it on the end of your paddle, and then crawl yourself in. That is completely a useless skill. When you need that skill, it is impossible to use that skill. When there's waves and wind and all sorts of other stuff going on, that skill set is a dead end. It doesn't really show me the parameters and the boundaries of non-normal. This is what matters to me. So this is what matters to me is that when it gets windy and the waves come up, I want to know that my instructors understand what that means and therefore deal with it effectively. Not go out there and find that, but as in when the waves start to come up, they say, oh yeah, I know what's going on here. We've got to get to shore. Because in their own mind, they're saying, I've seen this before and it gets ugly fast. So developing this set of skills on a pond doesn't create that mindset. And if anything, it reinforces a negative mindset, which is, oh, don't worry, I can get back in my boat. Well, these dudes here in this photo cannot get that swimmer back in their boat, if you can see what's going on here. So one paddler has got the paddler on the right has got the swimmer out with them, and the paddler on the left is trying to manipulate a boat that's kind of half submerged. This is the stuff that I worry about as a manager. Now, you may never take your clients there. So your group of students or your client group may never find themselves in that environment, and that's okay. However, you still have inherent risks that you deal with. If you're sea kayaking on the open coast, this is an inherent risk. If you're backpacking and crossing streams, there's inherent risks that go with that. If you're rock climbing on top rope, there's inherent risks. And if you're just plain old doing a wilderness-based camping program, there's inherent risks. So we need to train those shoulders beyond the normal day. So non-normal, how do we help folks understand non-normal? We do that by helping them build their training, their coping skills at the boundaries. So meaningful interaction with inherent risk. I say this all the time. This is kind of like my default in a training scenario. How can we create meaningful interaction with inherent risks? We can do that by helping people see where the boundaries are. So these are some of my college training programs. So we run a 2-year diploma program here at a career training college for adventure guides. And we have nature guiding programs and some other ones. I'm going to use some of the more vivid images to see how this compares, but that's scalable. So do you recognize what's going on here? If you've ever done river rescue training, you might recognize this as a tethered hole swim. So this is the Ottawa River, famous whitewater rafting river, just down the road from our campus here. What we have is students jump in that hole and get recirculated with a rope on. They get a few go-arounds, right? So they get a few recycles, and then we pull them out. So you ask the question, what kind of skills are we building there? The answer is we're building coping skills. We're not building swimming skills. We're not building rescue skills. We're not building anything other than an understanding of what's going on here. That's sense making. So we're building an ability to cope at the boundaries. So there's one scenario. Take that to a rock climbing world. If you've got rock climbing instructors who've never fallen, that's inherent risks of that activity, isn't it? And they really need to have an understanding of this is what falling means. I don't like it, and I don't ever want to find myself there, especially when I have students belaying me. So if you're a rock climber and you look at this photo and it turns your stomach, it's like, well, you know what? You maybe need to spend some more time interacting with this inherent risk. Maybe not in that scenario. Maybe with a second rope on you as well, for that matter. But the idea is to create some coping skills there, not comfort, not technical ability, purely that sense of what's going on here. Now, back on this Ottawa River, you know what? Here's a positive side effect of this hole swim. Get trashed around that hole and walk out of that saying, wow, I never want to go there again, and I sure don't want to expose my clients to that. As it turns out, this rapid, the run is off to the right here. So this all falls off to the left. The run goes off to the right, and it's perfectly smooth, real fun waves. It's probably the funnest rapid on the whole river. But the guides walk away saying, yeah, the left side's terrible, and I'm not going to go there, and I'm going to ensure my clients don't go there. There's value in that. James Rasmussen, one of the kind of granddaddies of risk management, says that the safest operations are the ones that don't forget to be afraid. So if we put a little bit of scare into people, I'm okay with that, recognizing there's limitations in that too. Right? People need to be ready for this, and people need to choose to be here. Likewise for rock climbing. I wouldn't suggest that you're just going to slap a rope on somebody and chuck them off a cliff. Yeah, do that a couple times, they'll eventually develop coping skills at the boundaries, but there's a skill set that goes here. We're only talking about critical safety skills here. Likewise for sea kayaking. If this is not the kind of scenario you could ever find yourself because you're doing inland paddling, fine, well, let's train for the inherent risk that you find in your scenario. If this is a reality, you need to find a way to have your guides experience these things so that they have ability, not the clients, that's a different story. We're talking about the guide's ability to cope and understand here. So by seeing what non-normal is, they can understand what's there and recognize it coming because they have a schema. Otherwise, it's all hypothetical. The idea of stream crossings, backpacking, stream crossing, you take off your backpack and you walk across on a variety of different things. If you've never fallen and swam in swift current without a life jacket, you have no clue. It's all hypothetical, and quite frankly, it doesn't work. Right? It's extremely difficult and quite dangerous. So we should probably be helping instructors understand that rather than just saying fail safe, don't fall when you cross the river. We should say, here's what happens when you fall when you cross the river. It's an unacceptable outcome. So here's your coping skills so you understand this more fully. So what are we doing? We're building sense making, trying to get to a scenario of helping people understand what's going on here. I get it. They can more quickly relate what's happening here. What does this all mean rather than what's the decision I need to make? Because the decisions sometimes just fall out. Many times there's no decision. The sense making itself steers what's next. Many times there are no choices. It's not a decision-making problem. It's one of recognizing the scenario, being empowered to act, and then putting in place that action itself. So I see a question for us here. Katie asked, is there a follow-up or email? Certainly, Dan, I'm expecting you can make these slides available for folks, and you'll see that I have an email address at the end of this as well. I'm happy to carry the conversation. So what are we doing? We're talking about sense making. We're talking about coping skills at the boundaries. That's what we're trying to build here. We're trying to get down to that what's at the bottom of this iceberg, right? So and the way to do that is to provide experiences. Have you ever seen this photo before? You can see what's going on here, right? So this is training with bear spray. This is what Knowles is doing now, given that they had a run-in Alaska with a grizzly bear that attacked some members of one of their summer courses. Pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting scenario. It's an interesting take on dealing with schema and dealing with sense making. I spent what 5 or 6 solid years in the Yukon, which is grizzly bear country, and you know what we do? We'd show people the bear spray and say, here it is. Don't shoot it off unless you have to. You take off the Lawrence thing and shoot it. Let's put it away and never talk about it again. That's not training, and that's not preparing people. I see now, not preparing people to deal with a bear that comes charging at you. So here's one approach to it. They've got Knowles has their friendly little bear here attached on a cart. They roll that cart at these people as fast as they can, and they all get to blast off these are the new training bear sprays. It's actually water vapor they're shooting, so they're reusable, quite inexpensive. It's a great move towards building schema and building sense making. Here's what a charging bear looks like. You and I could talk about that a lot, but that doesn't give us a schema. It's not until you see a charging bear and you understand the physiological reaction around that you can actually start to build some coping skills there. What's going on here? Here's what happens. And we go back at that Knowles story in Yukon. Interestingly, this was like later on in the Knowles trip. Let's say day 23, day 25 of a 30-day trip. They've talked about bears every moment of that trip so far, right? Always bear, bear, bear. That's how Alaska and Yukon goes. It's on top of mind all the time. Whenever the bear presented itself, one of the students who were there said, I thought I saw a hay bale. I've heard other people see bears and say, it looks like a donkey. So what are they doing? They're failing at sense making. So we've talked about bear, but without the real schema to categorize it, we call it a donkey. We call it a hay bale. So that's our mind grasping for some way to make sense of cues that we don't quite understand. So here's a scenario drawing this over and over, right? So draw the bear spray and shoot it. If you're in the mountain environment, this is pretty common. So while one set of skills here is how to do a self-arrest, I would argue the more important set of skills here is how to cope with the confusion of sliding down a snow slope, how to get oriented, how to do something with it. That's coping skills at the boundaries. So I see great benefit in these things, and I think this is where we can more purposefully do our training, right? Is try to do these things. Back with, these are my student photos again. Can imagine, so try to imagine what's going on here. So that's Ryan on the right holding the paddle up. That's one of the students. We have a kind of a secondary safety student. What's he gonna do? Yep, pushing them underwater. Trust me, I don't show this photo to parents of the students before they show up. Is there any technical skills here? Not really. This is about what's it like to be pinned underwater, right? And it's a freak out the first time you do it. It's like I freaked out the first time I did it. But after that, it's like, oh, you know what? I know how this goes. So it's building coping skills at the boundaries. Now, as it turns out in Canada, the last 3 river guide deaths, 2 of them were based on life jacket entrapment, similar to these. It would behoove us, if that's an inherent risk, to expose students to what is that like so they can cope there. And in the Swiftwater Rescue Certification System, you actually need to be able to escape your life jacket underwater. So that's what we're building towards here. Technical skill, fine. Almost irrelevant because it's probably never going to happen, you know, knock on wood. But coping is what's important there. Sense making. So sense making is about this. It's about situational awareness. There's a field of situational awareness that fits in here. Situational awareness is that action, it is the activity of collecting the cues from the environment and absorbing those. That's situational awareness. So being open to the cues. Sense making is what you do with those cues. So the situational awareness world, as it turns out, doesn't really talk about sense making. And this is where academic stuff kind of breaks down, is that there's 2 parallel fields here, then they're talking the same language and they really need to like get together sometime. So I can draw these parallels for us. Situational awareness is about how we collect these cues. We're aware of all of the things that are going on. So now part 2 is how do I, from a sense-making standpoint, find a home for that? Recognize patterns, to call it what it is so I can respond appropriately. I do that through my defined role. 3rd bullet point, I'm the guide, I'm in charge, I need to respond. I may not know exactly what's going on here, but it's my job to act because I'm in charge. So that's where sense making and schema all start to fit together. So if we're going to get beyond decision making, and I believe we've matured beyond that. We know more than that now. And we want to start spending time on the subconscious and schemas and sense making by providing more opportunities rather than spending 20 days on this is the perfect course. We should spend 2 days on this is the perfect course and spend 18 on here's all the stuff around the borders and here's all the edges and here's where things can go wrong, and we're going to explore those. So what does that look like? It means you put people in a van and you drive them to stream crossings and you spend a day doing stream crossings in a safe environment, in quotation marks, so that they build coping skills at the boundaries. So while you're training your backpackers, you might put life jackets on them all so that you can actually experiment with stream crossings and see what failure looks like. Exactly how high can the water be up your leg before you get swept away? Do you want them to experiment with that the first time with clients in the field, or would you rather do that under the supervision of your experienced staff who can set up safety and do this properly? Meaningful interactions with inherent risk. And that's your homework, is to go away and look at your courses and look at your program areas and ask, what are the inherent risks? What are the things that we know can go wrong and realistically probably don't go wrong all that often? So for that reason, let's go there and provide some exposure for our staff so that they can be comfortable there. This gets to safe failure over fail safe. Fail safe operations is we're going to train you to do it right so it never goes wrong. There's limits to that. Yeah, that might work, but there's limits to that because randomness happens and, quite frankly, errors happen. We know that that's a part of the human experience. So how can we create the opposite? Safe failure, so that interaction is not the first time that the interaction is having. So what we're really talking about here is how do we get to a place, right? So how do we build a model to get there? And we can do that by having this kind of goal. The hard, like Rasmussen's idea about the boundaries, if people really understand what those boundaries are, they can enact different ways to stay away from them. Instead of a prescribed event, a prescribed recipe, we give people some alternatives here. And we give them alternatives by giving them a breadth of experience and a breadth of schema to improve their sense-making skills. So reiterating this about critical skills, it translates less as it becomes less and less time sensitive and less critical. But when time matters and we need to be able to act quickly, this is the stuff that's most important. So what do? We identify program-specific risks. We look for ways to create interactions with those risks in a training scenario. We're probably going towards the low probability, high consequence type activities. If we look at the kind of traditional probability consequence grid for assessing risk, the high probability, low consequence stuff, our guides see it all the time. So that's normal, right? We anticipate those things, and we're probably already, our skill set's already very comfortable there. So let's go where we don't spend much time, the higher consequence, lower probability stuff, and create some activities there in a setting that's purposeful. I don't want to say contrived, because I think the risk needs to be real so that people get the real understanding where the boundaries are and where their own limits are so they can stay away from them. So that makes the boundaries clear. That's, I think, is so powerful, and that whenever a guide or an instructor knows that I don't have the ability to cope when the waves get this big, when the wind gets this strong, or when the water gets above this point on my leg, I know I can't go any further. That's no longer hypothetical, it's now real. Where are those boundaries? Number 3 here, your own incident report forms, IRFs, your own incident reports probably direct you to what's already not normal. If it lands on an incident report, it by default is not a typical outcome. So you look at all those things, and those incident reports themselves become case studies, and case studies are a way of building schema. Now, they're not as real and not as rich, but it is a way to do that. It's a way to create that understanding of the potential. And then if you can follow through and provide real experience there, all the better. So where's all this going? As a model, and even more specifically, what science can tell us, what brain science can tell us, multiple schemas are better than one single durable schema. Having lots of options, lots of experience matters. Now, for the record, whenever we talk about it, we generally recognize experienced guides bring more to the table than a rookie guide. Well, one of the things they bring to the table is a wealth of schema, is that they've seen things happen. And when we say they see things happen, it means they've categorized cues in different ways and had different experiences, so they will hopefully anticipate it differently. And that when we know that that's how our brains work, is that when we take in cues, we go shopping for a home for it. Rookies don't have many homes to put those cues to. Experienced people do. That's why we can build schema, and we can create that experience faster. How do we do that? We focus on non-normal, and we focus on boundaries. Where are the edges? So let's go there and get some coping skills at those boundaries. That hopefully, and like I said, we weren't spending number 3 a lot of time on this, about defined roles and authorities to act. It enables that authority to act because there's a sense of, oh, I've been here. I know what's going on. That'll create an environment where people, when confronted with failure, will hopefully approach it safely rather than approaching it from a scenario of, I've never been here before because I've never allowed myself to fail. Safe failure becomes positive, becomes powerful. An image that we went by here, this doesn't work for avalanches. I've been asked this by several different people who spend their time in the avalanche world. I don't really know the answer to that question. There's no real way to have a meaningful interaction with an avalanche that doesn't kill you. Really, I'm not sure. It's not my own area of expertise to know how it fits here, but I think the challenge is, how can we create some schema and some understanding? Maybe it doesn't work there. There's clearly going to be some boundaries on this thing and make it where that's going to work. So there's some references that are tied to this, and like I said, these are really ideas that are existing in other fields. I'm just trying to package them and put them together into a model that can work for us. My own pitch, I have a textbook that's widely adopted across Canada, and many American colleges and universities have picked this up as well as a part of their story, and it's woven into those pieces of this textbook. I think this conversation, and we've seen a maturity around the decision-making part of the story, how decision-making is recognized with limitations now. This is our next chapter and our next story about how can we train for non-normal by meaningful interactions with inherent risks. We all have those inherent risks in our program, so how can we train our staff so that they have coping skills at those boundaries? So there's my long story to get where we're going. So I think it would be the time to open the floor. If you have questions specifically about any detail that's in here, or maybe about how this might kind of fit together, why don't you use the Q&A box, and you can put together through that Q&A function, put together any questions if you might have them. I'm open to whatever there might be. You'll see my contact information is there. I'd also be happy to have a conversation offline if you're wondering how this might all fit together as well. But questions that you can share, we can turn this into a discussion. Sure. Managing staff emotions during those moments. Yeah. So clearly we need to have folks who are ready for where these parameters are. Now, I've shown you some really provocative imagery, right? Like I said, I'm not expecting you to go and chuck your rock climbing instructors off a cliff. Falling is falling, but you know what? More importantly, falling is about having a belayer that can catch you. So is it emotionally traumatic to catch a climber on belay? So no, and those are the coping skills, right? Those are the inherent risks. So unload some of the dramaticism that I used here to kind of make the point and to see how this can still fit. So yeah, most certainly there's staff emotion as a part of this, clearly. Now, these are real risks. So this is the other part of this, is that if my instructor's going in the field sea kayaking, we do it in a maritime environment. That's what the weather gets to be like. And if that's going to overwhelm them and freak them, I want it to be under the training umbrella and not while they have clients behind them. So yeah, emotion matters, but it matters at work too. And these are just the coping skills that we're trying to get to. Do you have any recommendations for training regarding non-clicking triggers? Yeah, good one. I like your word. So non-clicking triggers are when, so lightning is a clicking trigger. It's like, wow, lightning strike, bang. Oh, we better go into our lightning protocols. Non-clicking triggers are things that slowly creep and get worse and worse and worse and worse. So there's where this has its value. That worries me. Non-clicking triggers worry me. That's of all of the things that are kind of on my desk in the wide range of programs that we run here, that non-clicking triggers worry me, that just escalate and get a little bit worse. Rasmussen would argue, and I'm not sure if there's pure science to back this up, would argue that by knowing where the boundary is, recognizes that you're marching towards it. Right, and the non-clicking triggers are the one. Or sorry, clicking triggers just bounce over the border, and we all get it. That's obvious. But the scenario of, well, you know what, the waves are getting a little bigger, the water's getting a little deeper, or you know, the environment's changed enough that it's maybe wandering away. Well, if you've got a multiple schema laid out for you, that hopefully allows to recognizing when it's starting to click from one to the other. That's the situational awareness world, and that's what they're really focused on, is that idea about non-clicking triggers. So. There's some interaction here. There's no quick answer to that, but I believe this model about understanding, training folks so that they understand where the borders are, is a better way to deal with non-clicking triggers than the alternative, which is the kind of, here's the perfect normal trip and let's train for normal. Non-normal at least gives a model that we can see where we're heading towards. Is it possible to effectively do this kind of training with online trainings, or is it more relevant in person trainings? There is a bit of research on this. Clearly, first-hand experience is what matters. Shouldn't say that, not what matters, is the most impact and the most powerful, because we have emotion attached to our memory and all that other stuff. We remember emotional experiences much better than those that are not. However, case-based learning, case study learning, is recognized as the next most useful way to learn, and we can still build schema through cases, especially a case that's well written. Now, your incident report forms are forms of case studies. But you would create that incident report into a story which puts the person there. Imagine you were here with a group of kids. Here's how the story unfolded. So if you can kind of place people there, they're actually going to open up a schema. It's not going to be a rich schema because it's not real. It's a somewhat hypothetical. But there is proof that something along the lines of case-based learning would be next in line, about a third as effective as real personal experience, and that's even 3 times more effective than just plain on talking about it. Talking about the potentials, that may or may not create any schema, because whenever we flip back to that subconscious response to the cues, we may or may not have memorized or created memories for any of those conversations that we had. Learning styles influence that a little bit. So online, yeah, it's tougher. It's better than nothing, that's for sure. So I recognize that there's some terrain that we can talk about in there. My own master's degree was in using case studies for learning judgment, and that's where I got to spend some time in that field. So there is some place there. At what point in training do you introduce these failing experiences? Well, there's some personal kind of risk tolerance attached to this. I come from the river world. In whitewater kayaking, and that's where I spent most of my time, the first thing we teach people is how to fail. We put them in a kayak, we take them out in the pond, we flip them over, and they come out. So when do we introduce failing? The first thing they do. So isn't that interesting? That's very unlike some other outdoor activities where they kind of hide that failure for as long as possible. And I don't prescribe to that myself. Clearly, I've got this idea that I think it's so valuable. So whitewater kayaking, it literally in your first 2 minutes in a boat, you're failing. In my world where we teach kayaking, we get to a beginner rapid, and we look at a beginner rapid, we talk about it, and everybody jumps in and swims through it. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen to a kayaker is you flip over, fall out, and you swim. Well, let's do that. Coping skills at the boundaries. So what that looks like in my program here, rock climbing, we focus a lot on the belayer catching a fall. It's not about the rock climber not falling. It's about the belayer catching a fall. So we teach folks how to belay. We load the weight. We get their partner to go up 4 feet and to load it, and they all get shock loaded on the belay, and they climb up 8 feet and they load it, and we're shock loading the belay. So the belayer gains coping skills at the boundaries. So when do you introduce these experiences? Early, the appropriate experiences now, right? So they need to have the actual skill set to take these. There's no use teaching somebody how to catch a fall if you've not taught belaying. So clearly there's a skill set that goes with those. And then as we're asking more and more of our instructors and we're exposing them to more and more inherent risks, we need to provide opportunities so they see those things. What language do you use to set the boundaries? This buildup, I believe, would be assumed in a progression to the edge. Yeah. And I think you're right on there. I think the boundaries are about trying to articulate what they look like. Your policies and procedures manual is another way to talk about boundaries. There's things that are okay and there's things that are not okay. And that's articulated in the way you do your operations as it is. So that's the boundary. And you can forget the word boundary and use the word about our policies or procedures, our risk tolerance, or whatever other language you might use. So yeah, there is a progression that gets to that edge. And I'm not talking about teaching a beginner whitewater kayaker how to become an instructor here. I'm talking about the instructors, right? They know how to do these activities, or at least we're kind of like creating some competence in these activities. We're not going to take them to the wild edge. We're going to take them to the edge that they're dealing with right now. And that's the reality of their world is, what's my failure point? What can I no longer do? So if it's from a skiing setting, backcountry skiing setting, we'll test them at their skill set, because that's where the failure edge lies. It's not way out on the parameters of an avalanche. It's here's what I can do with a backpack on my back turning in deep snow. So where's my own comfort level and what's my own abilities? So that boundary change, I've got my organizational boundary, but for the individuals themselves, they've got their own boundaries. Where are they going to fail at this, and where do they know their skills lie? And therefore, where are their own limits? Therefore, they're going to stay away from them. How do these principles apply to the controlled environment of a ropes course? Yeah, really good question, isn't that? So that might look a little different depending on what the ropes course looks like. So for the instructors, you ask the question of, where are the boundaries? So where do things go wrong, and where can we train those? So if it's a belaying function, great, we can train for belaying. But if we're much more worried about the boundaries of supervision, so that folks are clipping in appropriately, how can we train our staff to be aware of their groups, right? We can create training scenarios where we have people aware of their groups so they can subtly see these things. Showing our staff at a ropes course, come on up, everybody, climb up. Here's how you clip in, clip. Let's go through the elements. Let's do it a second time. That doesn't prepare them for hanging out on a sling over here and watching people go by for the next hour. That's a different skill set. So we should be working on those skills for where it really matters. Yeah, great. They build some comfort on how to go through these elements. What really matters is, will they be able to supervise people appropriately? That's the boundaries. Another field there about doing rescues and pickoffs. It's like, we got to drill people on that so that it's not confusing when it happens. We want them to respond quickly and effectively. So you look at your environment, ropes course or any others. Ropes courses are fairly controlled, fairly static, but it applies to all of them. Where are the boundaries, and where do we know things go wrong? So how can create training exposure to those things that go wrong before they go wrong? So that would be my quick version to answer that one. Your own incidents, your own history, and your operation is going to tell you, we know what can go wrong. So focus on that from a training standpoint, from all environments, all angles. How can we train our staff for that? How do you determine where the edge is located for each individual if you have a staff significantly different in experience? Yeah, so this is your number one. So Jay, this is a very good question. It's your number one challenge, quite frankly. If you've got an operation with a lot of staff and a variety of skills of staff, I tell you what, mentorship is still the way to do it, right? So still having a senior attached to a junior is still the way to do it, because that senior can understand the junior skills and be able to push their skills a little bit. So the edge is going to be different. And this is really blowing the lid off the one size fits all training. And when industry figured that out 25 years ago, is that individualized training is what's required. So you might have your senior trainers facilitating these meaningful interactions. That's their training, is to come up with training activities so that they can facilitate meaningful interaction. And for their younger rookie guides, they're building new schema, while the senior staff are building a separate set of schema of how they're watching people interact here. There is variety. It really comes down to your activities. So if you're a backpacking program, okay, you've got some seasoned people from the field and you've got some of the more rookies, look at your operating areas and say, what are the interactions that we're going to have with inherent risks? What kind of training can we offer? Because our rookies are not ready for as much, fine. Let's give them some of their own training at their own edges. And if our senior staff, I'm pretty comfortable saying at some point senior staff don't need any further exposure to these activities. They know what can happen at the boundaries. So really from this perspective, we're done training them from the critical response, because they've got multiple schemas already. We don't need to keep pushing them further and further. This edge, I believe that there's a hard edge out there, and it's not one that's totally malleable. If your company says, hey, we don't do stream crossings above the knee, well, there's no use experimenting beyond that, as long as your environment will allow that you can always make a shallow water stream crossing. We're not going to ask our staff to go and find more ambitious things to do. So I'm glad you bring this up, because we're not trying to create brave staff. In fact, I'd say the opposite. We're trying to scare them a little bit so they know where the boundaries are, nor are we trying to allow them or enable them to go and be as crazy as they choose to be. That's, as a manager, that's unacceptable to me. I've got hard lines. I want my staff to know where they are, and I'm going to create activities so they know where that line is. And now we're talking about the same language, the same things. It's not hypothetical. Great questions. And those are, I think, are the challenges that you're going to walk away from here, is to drive back to inherent risks in my activity. And now how can I create some interactions there so my staff see where those boundaries are? And don't get stuck with the wild limits. Where are the realistic limits in your activities? Knowing that most of us are doing much gentler activities, but they still have inherent risks, and there's still potentially time-critical situations emerge there. Thanks so much, folks.
So I think that's all the questions for right now, and thanks so much, Jeff, for being here, sharing this with us.
Yeah, not at all.
I've seen this before, and every time it's a really impactful presentation, and I'm sure our audience felt that way as well.
Great, thank you.